We're back, 2023. What better way to start than get every single manufacturer's 450, come out to our favourite testing ground, QMP, thrash the absolute beat out of them, and see which one's the best for you guys. So we've got 5 of the best manufacturers. We're going to put every single one of these things through its paces, see what the pros and cons for each are. First impressions of the KX, like bit of context, I've ridden a KX 450 for the last 2 years, recently been on a 125, a lot of time getting used to the bike, so much power, it felt very harsh on pretty much all of the bumps, but I think as I get more used to the 450 and the suspension on this thing again, I'm going to love the power of it, super smooth power.
YZ450 23 model. Probably the first thing when I sat on the bike, it's definitely skinnier than the previous model. That's like straight away, like as soon as you sit on the bike, you notice that. But then once I hit the track, it was the power. So there's so much torque in this bike. It's almost misleading because it's like, it's not real loud. It'll pull third gear out of the tight turns, yet if you go second gear or you want to run your gear longer, this bike will continue to pull for way longer than other models that I've ridden. So the engine overall for me is massive, it's awesome. So that's a massive plus for the bike. Plus the chassis, the rear end of the bike is really, really good over the chattery little bumps. Even the bigger stuff, anything you hit, this bike seems to just want to go straight. It doesn't want to kick sideways. The front for me, I felt a little bit hard to get down and into the rut. Other than that, the bike was unreal as a first impression.
First impressions on the FC450 are like, it turns great when you're in the corner, but the suspension is kind of letting it down in the big bumps. So much power, so arms are very sore, and when you add that in with the suspension, it's hard work.
So the 2023 Honda, I've never ridden a Honda before, so I was pretty excited to get out on this thing. I heard some pretty bad stories about it before from the boys, but I don't know what they were whinging about because I actually quite enjoyed it. It turns really well. Like when you're in the rut, you can just kind of tell it what to do, and it does it. It doesn't do anything silly. Little bit nervousness in the rear, but yeah, other than that, I really enjoyed it. It's a bit doughy off the bottom. I would say slow, to be honest, coming from a YZ450. But yeah, I'm not complaining. I really enjoyed it.
All right, so straight away when I jumped on the Cowie, I noticed the power again first thing, just way smoother. So not as aggressive out of the turns, and it was actually more manageable. So today we got some good ruts in certain turns, and then we got a lot of hard pack corners as well, where you really got to manage the power, and this bike was awesome for that. I actually much preferred this even over the Yamaha on the hard pack sections. It just felt like I could control the bike really with the throttle and roll the throttle on, steer with the rear end. The one negative of the bike was the front end. I felt like it just felt high to me. I couldn't actually get over the top of the bike and then place it where I wanted. But other than that, in general, I'm much more impressed with this than the 22. It just feels like overall a lot better plushness in the bike.
First thoughts on the 23 Yamaha are great. Like this bike's power is so good. As Joel said prior, like third really you can just carry everywhere, and second if you want a bit more. And the new shape, I feel like it's definitely nice and skinny and feels a lot more nimble than like what I'm sort of used to on a Yamaha. So yeah, great bike.
So the Husky was the first bike I rode after the Kawasaki, which is what I'm used to. Initial impression, the suspension, definitely at the bottom of the stroke feels a lot better than the Kawasaki. The power, just off the bottom of the throttle, was much smoother and easier to ride. I went into a rut that normally would scare me, and the amount of speed I was able to carry into it just because the throttle wasn't as snatchy off the bottom definitely made me feel more comfortable in the rut. Negatives, I didn't really ride this bike fast enough to find any negatives, in all honesty.
I really enjoyed this. You'll probably see in the last few videos, I've actually kind of never been really a fan of the KTM, but it just feels like a more finished bike. It's obviously, when you look at a KTM, it screams like high end. So I was actually very, very surprised. I could roll through the corners very, very nice. The throttle was there, lots of power, very confidence inspiring front end. I feel like I could sit on it, turn it, and it wasn't going to do anything silly. I really liked it. The air forks are a foreign feeling. Doesn't feel the same as like conventional spring stuff, but I don't think it would take that much to get it to where you want it. I was actually pleasantly surprised.
The Husky 450, for me, these bikes, the Euro bikes, just feel super long. So when I'm coming into a turn and they've got the braking bumps, I feel like I've got to be way over the back. And then when I actually have to turn, I find I'm always pulling myself up over the front to try to get the thing to turn and get that balance right. So that's a bit of a downfall for me. I personally feel like I'm almost too small for this bike. The power is probably the meatiest power of them all. Like, it just sounds grunty, and the bike actually sounds the best of them so far. It sounds sick as you like really get up it and go up the hills. The stabilisation as well, and that might be a part of it feeling long. Like long straight line ruts, this thing is just, it's not even a question. You just go straight through the middle of it. It's been the best in that area so far for me. Yeah, overall, my comfort wasn't great on it. Yeah, I'd say like it's an overall good bike, but just for me personally, I wasn't comfortable.
First impressions on a Kawasaki, this thing is actually unreal for a stock bike. Like, its power is so like, it's kind of doughy, so it's more manageable, and the suspension was great. Like, I would be happy to race this bike right now on this track. It was awesome.
First impression of the 23 Yamaha as a clubman rider, it's definitely a good bike. You can see why people are raving about this. I guess for myself, I couldn't ride this thing anywhere near its limit. I couldn't get the best out of it. One thing I noticed that it helped me with was on the Husky, I felt like I could get in the corner a lot better than I could on the Kawasaki, but middle corner and exit, I was nowhere still. On the Yamaha, I don't know what it was, but I definitely felt like I could just crack the throttle a little bit easier and ride the exits of the ruts, which for me, I suck at ruts. I hate ruts. So a bike that can make me, you know, better through those ruts is definitely the strongest part of this bike. The power as well, it sneaks up on you. Initially it feels like quiet or like a 250 at the bottom, but then it just keeps pulling. So that one made me overshoot a corner.
You should go hit these and just do your best James impression. Get super squirrely, air wheelie bonals. He's definitely got your speed. Roll speed.
So the Husky, once again, actually pleasantly surprised me. It felt a little bit more pitched than the KTM, so it had a little bit more almost stability at the front, how I liked the KTM through the real dusty stuff. It had a lot of front end traction, but this one almost had too much. The rear was a little bit nervous, a little more nervous than the KTM. It wasn't ultra nervous, but it was definitely a little bit more nervous than the KTM. I find the KTM's that happy medium. The engine's a little bit slower too. It's kind of more like a tamed down version of the KTM, which would be good for a vet rider actually. The KTM's got a lot of punch off the bottom, like they are ready to race, which is definitely a true statement. So Husky overall good bike, just a little bit more mellow and front end heavy.
So obviously the Honda 450 for me, it's my everyday bike. This is my bike. So I already sort of know what it does good, what it does bad. But for the 23, what I noticed is the rear end definitely is a little bit plusher than the old bike. But still now, after being able to ride the other bikes, so far it's got the worst rear end traction. So exiting the turns, I find it's hard to get this thing, especially if it's like on the drier sections. This thing just gets a lot of wheel spin. It's not driving forward. But as far as like being nimble in the ruts, I can make a mistake and still turn this bike in and control it throughout the ruts way better than anything else I've ridden yet. So for me, I feel like I've got more overall control mid-turn, but I'm definitely lacking that rear end traction and rear end comfort exiting all the turns. Front wheel, I know exactly where it is all the time. That's a massive plus. The Honda's got a really heavy front end. But overall, this is the most comfortable bike for me, like to be able to control. But I really wish I could put the Yamaha rear end with the Honda's front. but we, yeah, it's a good front end steering bike for sure.
The KTM 450, one of the last bikes I rode, and I really wanted to love this bike because I absolutely love the look and colour scheme of the 23 model. But unfortunately for me, this one was the most difficult and the harshest 450 to ride. I really didn't enjoy it, I'm sorry to say. Partly probably due to the fact that I rode the 350. It was much smoother, much easier to ride, and for me as a clubman rider, that's the bike I'd spend my money on. The 450, you know, KTM says ready to race, they mean it. This bike I think is ready for a, you know, intermediate pro level rider to go out there and do well on. I could probably get used to it, but for me, out of the box, I just couldn't. The power was too much, the suspension was too stiff, and yeah, I preferred the other bikes, unfortunately.
So the 2023 Yamaha is definitely a different bike. I come from the 22 Yamaha, that's my daily kind of rider, and this thing is completely different. Heard some stories that it was kind of similar to the old Yamaha, but it doesn't feel like a Yamaha at all, to be honest. When I sit on the bike, the front end is super stable, it sticks in the ruts. I don't have to lean forward. On my bike I've learned to lean forward to get the front wheel to stick, but this thing, the front wheel just sticks straight in the ground. The rear end's a little bit slippier than I was used to. I had a moment up the top where the back end stepped out on me, but it wasn't, once I got used to that, it was like turns very well. Definitely narrower, it's definitely gone on a diet, feels definitely lighter. But yeah, super stoked with the start of it. The power in the engine is outrageous. So much, but not out of control, doesn't want to kill you. It's like a tractor, so super stoked.
First impressions on the Honda were, I was kind of shocked. I just completely did not gel with the bike. Like usually can ride around stuff, but for this bike, I don't know, just something about it was off for me. So not my favorite. I can respect like the power's great and stuff like that, but like overall feel for me was just not there.
So the KTM for me felt like a race version of the Husqvarna. So again, felt like a long bike again, but the power felt lighter and like quicker. It was really responsive, which made the whole bike actually feel lighter. Every corner, it's like wherever I wanted the throttle or wherever I wanted power, as soon as I touched the throttle, it was fully connected and the bike would go. So I love that about this bike. The engine was just, it felt like a full-blown race engine. Stoked with that. The suspension was a little bit stiffer also than the Husky, which for me, I personally rathered. I felt like it was more stable on the fast sections. But the downfall again is just placing that front tyre for me. The front end felt a little bit skatey and a little bit harsh coming into the turns. And I felt like I had to be super patient to get in. Once I was in, I was fine, but just finding the ruts initially, I struggled with that.
All right, Honda. I was nervous about riding this bike. I first got a Honda when they went to the new gen Honda. I've been a Honda man my entire life. I crashed it every time I rode it and sold it after 3 rides. I hated it that much, just didn't gel with it at all. But having ridden it then, the front end is definitely good. Like, as an average rider, I'm constantly missing my braking marker, not getting the rut right. At least on this bike, the front end was able to, you know, correct itself mid-corner. If I was in the rut a little bit hot, I felt like I could just lean it over a bit further. If I was in a bit too slow, I could roll the power on it, and I just felt comfortable on it in the ruts. Negative for me was it just felt really harsh and skatey in the rear end. Power was pretty good, no complaints there. All round, I actually enjoyed riding that, so it's kind of surprised me.
So the Kawasaki, I was actually pleasantly surprised. This thing was so stable, didn't do anything silly. The front end was super planted everywhere I went, and it just, lots of roll speed, just didn't do anything silly in the ruts. I really actually enjoyed that. It was very stable. It is doughy off the bottom, but it's usable. It's not, it's not like you lose the arse out of it, so I was actually really pleased by that. The rear brake sits too low, but that obviously can be fixed. I was actually really pleasantly surprised with the Kawasaki. I don't really have any complaints about it, so yeah.
First impressions on the 2023 KTM are, it's definitely a race bike. Like, find it easier to go faster on than to go slower on. But in comparison to the Husky, I actually did prefer this at this stage. Found it was just a bit more, suspension was a bit nicer, which is strange, but yeah, love the power, and it's, yeah, good race bike.
All right, that's a wrap, guys. Favourite bike of the day for me was the Husky. Reasons why I liked it. It was the easiest to ride. If you're like me and you go out once every Sunday, you've had about 25 beers the night before and you just want to survive the day, do all the jumps, get back to work safely on Monday, I would recommend the Husqvarna. Loved all the other bikes as well. It's just I felt the safest on this, and for the 450 that was key. Confidence was key for me, and the Husqvarna was the one.
All right, so favourite bike of the day. I'm just in between the Honda and the Yamaha. I just want to mash the two together, and I feel like you'd have the best bike like there even is. So I don't know, I'm going to waffle a little bit and say the Honda's front end, Yamaha's motor, and Yamaha's rear end. And I think like if these two could somehow have a baby, I would want that bike.
So bike of the day for me, surprised me, but it's actually the KTM. So I haven't been a fan of them in the past, but it won me over today in stock trim. The moto is super smooth, and the suspension was a little bit weird, but once I got used to it, it was very confidence inspiring, like I said, and I really just could trust that front end through the really dusty and tight corners, and then through the ruts, it just felt so stable. So I'm gonna have to say the KTM for today.
Bike of the day for me was the Kawasaki, actually. I sort of just felt like it was the most easiest to ride today and had like the smoothest power. And for like being a bit sore and tired, it was just a perfect bike. I loved it. The Husky and KTM, they're a race-ready bike, I feel like, and they've just got so much power, and this was just a fun, easy bike, and it's really enjoyed riding it.
So for the engine, out of all of the bikes we rode today, it's definitely the Yamaha. It was very easy to ride in terms of that initial throttle response, which I feel like for me is a pretty average motocross rider. The 450s, most of them are just so aggressive, it really is unenjoyable almost. The Yamaha definitely made it easy to just crack the throttle. It didn't really unsettle the bike, and then you could roll it on as much as you wanted until the thing was just about ripping your arms out of its sockets. But yeah, the Yamaha's strongest engine package for myself.
All right, so engine for me, I'm going to go the Yamaha. I felt like it had very minimal engine braking, which allowed the bike to roll really well. And then whenever you wanted the power, it was there. If you click down to second and you want that thing to snap, it'll pull, and it'll just about pull your hands out. But if you just wanted that torquey power, you could click third in any turn, roll the throttle on it, and it would just torque you out of it. So yeah, the Yamaha's sold for me.
My favourite engine was probably the Yamaha, to be honest. It carried like third really well, like just hooked up, and you could really get on it. And but I did like the Husky and KTM as well. It's so close, it's got so much power and such a crack. So, but yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Yamaha.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as well. I did like the KTM a lot, but the Yamaha just got that real linear feel. Didn't snap out of your hands and didn't do anything silly. It was very consistent and just had a lot of power. So when you really wanted to give it a crack, it would give it back.
Chassis for myself, I think the Husky again, it just felt the most plush. It gave me a lot of confidence. It just didn't do anything wrong. I couldn't fault it, so it's definitely the Husky for me.
Yeah, the chassis between them all, I guess it comes back to my overall favourite bike between the Honda and the Yamaha. They just got such different characteristics, but really, if I'm going to be honest with myself, I'm probably going to say the Yamaha. It was just comfortable. Like the Honda was almost like you can go fast, but you had to deal with it. I'm going to go the Yamaha.
So chassis for me, I'm gonna have to say the Kawasaki actually. It was just so stable through the corners. It was quite dry out there today between the KTM and the Kawasaki, but when it would be the corner, the ruts would be dusty and I was scared I was gonna go through them, the Kawasaki would just give me that confidence to just roll through it. Super stable, roll the power on and just come out the other end. So I really like the chassis and the Kawasaki.
Overall favourite chassis for me was between the KTM and Husky. I just think they're so nimble and I just love the way they feel and ride, so yeah, definitely them two, but yeah, the KX was definitely close by behind them.
So my favourite suspension package out of all 5 bikes, it's a close second from the Yamaha, but again, the Husky. I think it's just got a softer setting in it compared to all the others out of the box, because it just felt plush for me, and I'm riding a lot slower than all these other boys. But the Yamaha, I think, as I got more comfortable on it, it felt better and better and better. So I think if I had the Yamaha out here all day to myself, I think I would enjoy it the most.
Okay, so suspension for me, my favourite has to be the Cowie, especially on the track we rode today. A lot of little chattery bumps, and that thing just seemed to soak them up, like every single one of them. Even on the bigger stuff, it didn't give me a big kick, but it gave me the comfort on the small little stuff. Entering the turns, it felt like I was sort of on a bit of a cloud. It wasn't, definitely didn't feel harsh at all, which surprised me, because honestly that was my preconceived feeling on the Cowie. I thought that's what it would feel like, is a harsh, stiff feeling. It felt super plush, and I could steer it and put it where I wanted today.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say the same thing, to be honest. I really like the KX. They've got the coated bottoms on them, so that looks cool. So I'm going to go with Kawasaki.
That's real cool. Favourite suspension today was probably on the KX. Like, it was perfect. I was hopping bumps and wasn't kicking me anywhere funny. So yeah, definitely going to run with the KX for that one.
All right, so that's it for today. Been a pretty big day. The boys are exhausted. So make sure you like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.